know what, Jamie? Let's pop off right now. We got to get started.
We got to go.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's get the people in the chat. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrisSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, August 3rd, and we have a huge mailbag show coming for everyone. We put out the bat signal last night to IrisSportsDaily.com subscribers, and they gave us a ton of questions. This is gonna be a long one. We're not gonna try to keep everyone too late. But we have got a lot of stuff to get to. So we're going to get to that right away. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If this is your first time listening to the show, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell, right? Subscribe to the show. We're very proud of our show. We think we give people really good content, good things to listen to talk about, good discussion, and that sort of thing. So subscribe to the show. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. If you want to follow the audio format of this show, links are in the description below to follow the audio podcast, which is on Apple or Spotify or wherever you find your podcast. So yeah, check us out there. And before we get started, I want to thank one of our sponsors, ESQclothing.com. Jamie, I was going through I'm gonna share with the people the website here, because God's got some really good stuff here. All sorts of different colors, different. I love this one. I love this one here. This is the one I own. Bamboo dress shirt, breathable, machine washable, odor resistant, wrinkle resistant. Good for any occasion, really. You can wear it to work. Your business casual type setting. You can wear it out with friends. You can wear it to weddings. He's even got a tuxedo shirt, Jamie, which looks really sharp.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yes, it looks good, man. So any occasion you can wear this stuff. Check it out. He's got a performance dress shirt is what they're calling it. So you can be out, you can feel good, you can feel light, breathable, airy. You're gonna feel good wearing his stuff. So check out ESQclothing.com. And upgrade your shirt game, Jamie. It's really good stuff. We're really proud of it, and we're proud to rep that brand. So let's just get right to it, Jamie. First of all, how are you doing, man? How's your Thursday so far?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm just looking forward. Tomorrow, going to be wheels up to South Bend, and then going to be there for the next week. So I'm looking forward to it.
Very exciting time. It's a very exciting time. Can't wait for you to get eyes on the team. It really livens up our show, for one, and for two, I trust your opinion, man. I like what you see, and I like how you evaluate things, and so it'll be great for us to get your firsthand account on the team and that sort of thing, and how guys look, and hopefully get to see an open practice there, and all that good stuff. So you're going to want to stay tuned in to our IrisSportsDaily.com. First of all, website. There's a ton of content going out every day. Matt, Andrew, I think Mike. Is Mike still on site? He's
left now, but there's obviously no. But he was
so Mike left, and then you are replacing him. So there's with so much coverage from Irish Sports Daily. No better time to sign up for that. Christmas decorations. Yeah, you know what? So it's actually kind of funny. Behind me, you can see the snow people in the back. It covers the fireplace. We have a fireplace that we don't use because it's in a weird spot, but the kids don't. We don't want the kids getting in there, and they like the snowmen, so they stay up year round. So
I feel like this is a job for the property brothers. Get them in there. That's what they do. They're like, well, you know what? We made you a functional fireplace.
It's probably could make that change, but the kids like it. So whatever makes the kids happy, that's good. Tyler, thank goodness he has notifications on, so he knows when we're going live. Last week Tyler did not, and he missed us live. So, oh my goodness. BQ, PQ, what it do? I moved a client call to watch this live. Don't tell my boss. You know what? Hitting and hustling. That's what it is from PQ, what it do. That's
I mean, PQ deserves a super chat for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to the questions. Brendan's taking a shot at California. That's fine. You really need that fireplace for the frigid sub 60 California nights. Listen, it gets cold, man. It's in the 50s sometimes. Double jammy weather, like Brendan says. So it's good stuff. All right, let's get to the questions. And this one isn't really a question. It's just more of a posited from Irish Bronx. Let's do some over-unders. Hartman, and so I asked him later, this is assuming 13 games. Okay, so it's not a 12-game regular season, 13-game regular season. Over-under, Hartman, 3,600 yards, estimate 1,250 yards. I assume that's just rushing. Merriweather, 700 yards, and Mitchell Evans, 7 touchdown catches. Jamie, why don't you go first? Over under Sam Hartman, 3,600 yards.
I'm going over there. I think he's going to have like
278 yards a game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be over. It's going to be around that number, though. That's a good. Good job, Bronx. I think that's a good number to put it at, because I would guess slightly over.
I'm gonna say over too. I think they're going to throw the ball. I think they want to throw the ball, and I think that is something that that Jared Parker is going to bring to the offense. I think he wants to chuck the ball around a little bit, and I think I've kind of noticed, and maybe we'll get to this later, but when we'll get to it from Marcus Freeman later. But I think there's a good chance that we don't hear him talking about protecting the ball anymore. We don't hear that as much. We heard it early in the spring, but not as much anymore. And I think that's because there's just kind of a kind of a known, we're going to I don't want to say loose with the ball, but we're going to take some chances a little bit more. And I think that's his mindset, and I think that's the team's mindset. I think they'll still run it, I think they'll still run it, and they're still going to be a physical team. But I do think that they're going to let it loose. And I think they'll let it loose down the field a lot more than they have. And so I think that's going to lead to a lot more opportunities. So it's a good question. What about Audric Estime, Jamie?
I'm going over there for sure. Just because I think he's going to be no doubt RB1. I think he's going to get, a large bulk of the carries. I definitely think they're going to play multiple backs, but I think he's going to be the guy where last year, there were some games where it's like first quarter, Estime hasn't touched the ball yet. That's not going to happen this year. And also too, I think when it comes down to it, especially in any game where that really matters, he's going to be the guy they put in to close the game. Right. So he's going to be the guy they rely on. So there's going to be some games where I think he's, approaching 30 carries, I think. Not every game, he'll have some games where maybe he has 15 or something, but I do think he's going to have a monster year.
So I did the math, assuming 225 carries for Estime, which I think is fair, right? I think that's a fair assumption. Last year, what did he have? 150 or something like that. 158, I think it was. And he was sharing time with Diggs. I don't think he's going to be sharing as much.
Diggs and Tyree.
Yeah, Diggs and Tyree. So I think 75 more carries on the year, I think, is fair for him. And to get to 1,250, we're talking 5.5 yards a carry. Last year, he averaged over that. So, and I don't see his yards per carry going down this year. If anything, I think they'll be higher.
It could go down slightly, but not. I would not drastically.
Right. Definitely. Last year, what was he at, 6?
Yeah, something over 6.
Yeah. So So if he's at 6, I think he'll reach this easily. I think this is definitely over. Tobias Merriweather, 700 yards. It's interesting because
sorry, he was 5.9, sorry.
Oh, 5.9. Okay. Yeah. So any 5.7. I think he'll be at 6. I think they'll be up more. Matt's coming in with the air raid, 225 carries in an air raid offense. Listen, we all can dream, right? I had my Nike dream, and Matt has his air raid offense with no tight ends dream, and we can all do that. It's fine. Well, we got a Holden Stays question coming up later. Matt he'll probably want to leave for that one because there's a lot of tight end talk there. But yeah, I think it's going to be way over. I mean, barring injury, of course, but all these are kind of barring injury. Tobias Merriweather, 700 yards. I guess a better question is what do you think his catches are going to be? How many catches do you think? What would you set the over under for catches on Tobias, Jamie?
Probably 35, I guess. So, I mean, if he gets 35, he'd have to have 20,
20 a catch.
Yards to catch.
Yeah.
It's possible, but I'd probably take the under for this. I think he's going to have, this is my prediction for Tobias this year. I mean, obviously it could change and, whatever, we'll see. But my assumption is he's going to have like some games where you're like, man, 4 for 140, like Tobias, huge game, breakout game, right?
Yeah.
And then the next game, 3 for 40 or something. You know what I mean? Like it's
like 2 for 44.
Yeah, or something, because it's just depending on the game and depending on whatever. And I just think he is not quite there where he is the definite like wide receiver 1 guy. So I mean, if he was wide receiver 1, he's getting over 700. Like Jaden Thomas, I'm taking, well over 700 over there. But I wouldn't. Merriweather, I think I would probably say he's probably going to be, I would guess, in the six-ish range. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I kind of with you in that I think Notre Dame is going to they're going to have a lot of weapons that hurt you week to week. Like different guys that hurt you week to week, right? So like
it might this week will be a Tyree game, right? Like something like that, yeah.
Or like this is like 1 week will be like a heavy Holden Stays kind of game. And I think Jaden Thomas will be the constant. Like he'll always be, in that 5-6 catch area. But I think, like you said, there's just going to be different guys. Like, honestly, I could see a game where it's like, oh, like you said, Chris Tyree game. I could see just like randomly Jaden Greathouse has a 6, 7, 8 catch game. Just something in there where it's like, hey, it's his day, and they build off that. I think Tobias will be a mainstay in the offense, but I don't think he needs to have like huge volume to have a huge kind of impact on the team and their success. I think they're going to be able to spread it around a little bit more than people are thinking. And the way that they attack teams doesn't have to be the same week to week. So that'll be interesting to watch. And the only one that I think all these over-unders are good. The only one that I would say like definitely not is Evans' 7 touchdown catches. I don't think he's going to be the starter at tight end. So like,
I think he's going to be the starter.
You think he's going to start over Stays? Scott? I don't think so.
I think so.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Because, well, one, I think people are like, you got to block.
You do got to block. It's a fair take.
You got to block, and he's really good at that. So he's going to there's a chance that Stays gets more catches or whatever. But I don't know if like Stays or Raritan or whoever, right, gets more catches. But it's just like Tremble was ahead of Mayer technically, like as a starter, but Mayer got more catches. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think so. I would definitely go under for this 7 touchdown catches too. 7 touchdown catches for a tight end is a lot.
Prior to Mayer, that was the Notre Dame record.
Yes. So Mayer in his sophomore year had 7. Last year he had 9, right? So is he going to have a Michael Mayer sophomore year, kind of like he's going to be targeted like that in the red zone? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would say probably not for any of the tight ends, right? Like it's probably more likely that they spread it around for a tight end, unless it becomes to the point where you're like, oh, Stays is just this undeniable dude. But even then, I wouldn't even take over for 7 for Stays. Like that is probably not likely. I think it'll be more spread out. I think it'll be more spread out. And I would guess the only person I think you could say the only person that I would feel 100% confident over receiving touchdowns for 7 would be Thomas. And then I think it'll be kind of more spread out from there. That's just the way I see it.
Matt puts in the chat, Emeka Egbuka, more receiving yards than Notre Dame's leading receiver. So last year, Egbuka had 1,151 yards. So do you think Jaden Thomas tops that?
I guess he'd probably be just below that, and I probably think that Egbuka will probably have a bigger year this year. So I would probably say under. I think Egbuka and Harrison are probably going to have like both, just monster numbers this year.
I just don't know about Kyle McCord. I don't know. Like, I haven't watched him play. I don't know anything about him. I'm interested to see, like, because the reason Ohio State can have a ton of yards is they play with really good pace. They play very fast, and Notre Dame hasn't. I'm wondering if Notre Dame is going to try to push the pace a little bit this year. It's just something I'm interested to see.
One other thing too, because and this was brought up by Fifth Quarter Irish on Irish Sports Daily Sport, who does a great job with a lot of like kind of little deep dive stat kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how the change in the rule with not stopping the clock after first down. So plays are going to go down. They're just naturally going to go down. So teams that kind of play with pace, it's not that they're still going to play with pace, but you're just not going to have as many plays. Because you're not going to have as many plays, probably yards will go down. And so that could have an effect on it too, that probably maybe we're not taking into account.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll see it'll be interesting actually to kind of see at the end of the year, if you look at it and you're like, wow, like everybody's plays are like way down, especially some of these teams that, average over 80 plays a game. Like, what is that going to look like when you get to the end of the year?
It kind of concerns me for the Navy game too, just because those games are already shorter. If they get a couple drives where it's like the clock never stops on first down, it's like they're already burning clock. So just something to track. Iris Bronx is next one. Who plays the most snaps opposite of Watts at safety?
My guess would be Henderson. I think it'll be Ramon Henderson. My guess is DJ Brown he'll play a significant amount of snaps. And then I think it's going to be a kind of thing where they play a lot of guys too. But Watts will be kind of clearly above everybody else in terms of total number. I think that's pretty fair to expect.
Something I'm going to be tracking very closely, and something I want to hear from you when you get back, is who is backing up Watts. Is it Henderson or is it Carter? And that kind of remains to be seen. Antonio Carter to me is like a huge wild card. It's just I don't know anything about him. We haven't
seen enough from
him.
Yeah.
So I want to hear about that specifically when you go. Beezer 12 washing beard. Love the name. Love the Avi there. Sam Hartman over under 3,500 yards. It's our first question of the day. So if you want, you can go back, or you can listen to the rest of this and go back to the start of the show, and we do a long deep dive on that. We talk about that. We both took the over on that. All right. Next question from Nyber. If I could read only one book before the season starts, which would provide the single most informative history of Notre Dame football, which history of Notre Dame football book would be the most fun to read? You got to take?
Well, I mentioned, I think I mentioned last week in Six Thoughts when I was talking about Johnny Lujack, rest in peace, obviously, to Johnny Lujack, Notre Dame legend. But the Talking Irish book by Steve Delson about it spans all the way, and it's an oral history book, right? So you get players from the 40s, all the way from the Leahy teams, all the way up through the Holtz era, right? So that's a pretty comprehensive book. I'm sure there's other books that talk about that you can find from before that go into Rockney and all of that. Which, you know, I actually, unfortunately, I haven't read enough of like those kind of books going back there, but I just think from spanning all that time, there's just not, I don't think there's another book like that out there, not that I've seen. So it's got to be up there as the most informative one, just because it spans so many decades. A ton of great stories in there. I mean, I loved it. It's something that I read when I was like a teenager, and I was like, I read it multiple times. Like I couldn't put it down. It was just something that if you're you know, a huge Notre Dame fan, it's something that I would highly recommend. I'm sure it's like, you know, because years have passed, it's like, you know, you're not seeing it at Barnes and Noble or whatever, right? So you have to go find it on Amazon or you know, at a local bookstore or something like that. But it's definitely, I would highly recommend it. And then in terms of what any football book would be most fun to read, I think that's a very fun book. But another one that I would recommend, and somebody else mentioned in the comments last week of Six Thoughts, was Resurrection by Jim Dent, which goes into that first year of Ara Parseghian at Notre Dame, and how he kind of turned around the program and all these changes that he made that like were, you know, not maybe controversial, but like different. Like he shook things up, and you know, they really like, I think a lot of people who, you know, you look back at the memory of Notre Dame football, and you know, I'm sure the people who lived through that era remember before era and think about those kind of dark times in terms of, you know, where they had dropped off after Leahy. But he really kind of, I mean, the book is called Resurrection for a reason, right? Like they really kind of took a step back into the spotlight, and he brought Notre Dame back into being a national power. And it's just a really kind of more of a deep dive into that, you know, that era, his coaching staff, that team. Really, really great book. I love that book.
Good stuff. That's good stuff, Jamie. I've read Talking Irish. I loved it. It's like you said, it is really like a comprehensive like I love the oral histories. Oral histories are really good. And it's from a time, and it's from a time when you didn't have like today there's so much coverage, and there's so many, like I've done a bunch of interviews with like Notre Dame players on this podcast, you know, and those guys are really good about giving time to the media afterwards and just kind of like getting their story out and things that happen. But you don't have that back in the day. There's not that kind of media. So it's a really good book on that front, and I recommend it to anyone who's interested in that. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. XRR&D 1994. From what you've seen and heard so far, who are you expecting to have a breakout year this year? What do you think, Jamie?
I think Jaden Thomas. That would be he'd be hands down my pick on offense. And then I mean, on defense, I kind of want to see it, but certainly like I'll say, like, if you read some of the comments from Al Washington, and certainly, I mean, he's a positive guy. He was pumping up his guys. He said positive things about everybody, but the way he talked about Jason Anye and Gabriel Rubio, I think was, and I mean, and you could throw in Josh Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka in there too, but really like specifically Anye and Gabriel Rubio, you know, he was really, really excited about both those guys. And I think that's super encouraging for Notre Dame. So I'd probably go that way on defense.
Yeah, on offense, you know what? It's like I kind of think the answer might be like Chris Tyree. You know, it's like he's been in a role that it's like he's obviously been a regular player, but he hasn't been someone who it's like, you know, like breaking out, you know, and I think we could see that from him this year, just in a totally different, I'm just kind of a different way of thinking about him. I'm very intrigued by him. I will admit, I don't know if I'm ready to like predict it or anything. Like I'm when I talk about the team to people like offline or you're just kind of on Twitter or something, like I catch myself kind of pricing in this Chris Tyree thing and I don't know if I should. Like I feel like maybe I shouldn't. But I kind of find myself doing that, and so that's one where I think I really want to track that. I think Chris Tyree could be one. Another one I think is Holden Stays. I do think it's possible that he is kind of like, oh, he's Notre Dame's next in line with the tight ends. I look at him and I look at his size and look how long he is, and this like the way he runs and his strides. Like he's very, in the way I view these guys, it's like, how would I feel covering this guy? And it just doesn't look fun. It doesn't look like a good time. It looks like he's so wide. You can't get around him. He's long enough to where he can go over top of you. Like there just aren't a lot of safeties and or linebackers who are well equipped to deal with him. Like I feel like he would give Kyle Hamilton problems from a size standpoint. I mean, Kyle Hamilton didn't.
Hold up here.
I'm just saying, like he would give him problems.
Stop the podcast.
I mean, problems like he might catch a pass. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
He might catch a pass on him.
I thought you were going to talk about him torching him, and I was
no.
Great.
I mean, he wasn't torched, but he hasn't been torched by anyone literally in his life. So,
I don't know about that free agent guy last year in the Ravens camp.
Oh, in practice? In practice, that doesn't count. I mean, Lawrence Keys, he got Kyle in practice. That's nothing. So those are the two guys that I would hit on. Your sleeper, a low 4-star, 3-star in the 23-24 classes. Feel free to omit some of my questions if you get more than enough. Irish Bronx, no, that's not how it works. You submit a question and we read the question. So that's how it's going to go. Jamie, you answer this question. I have to go fix something. Something's going off in my house. You answer the question. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to go Armel Mukam in 2023. One, I just think he's a guy who obviously hasn't played football as long as some of these other kids. He's come from Canada, went and really had made a big jump in terms of his physical development. He's 280 pounds now. So they kind of recruited him and he was like a 240-pound defensive end. Now all of a sudden he's a 280-pound defensive tackle. This guy's going to get bigger and stronger. I really like his twitch, his athleticism. I think he's someone that isn't going to be a guy who obviously plays this year. And might, it might be hard to get in the rotation next year even, but in long term, I do think he's a guy who he has NFL traits. Like he could develop into an NFL player if he puts in the work, right? Like I think that is a definite possibility with him. And then I'll also go on the defensive line and I'll go Cole Mullins in the 2024 class. One, I just think he's underrated. I think he's a guy who's better than his ranking in overall in the industry. I think he is going to be someone who shows more now that he's if he plays more on the edge rather than off the ball, which he kind of split a little bit of that last year. Plays against really, really good competition and obviously in the state of Georgia. And I just think he's a guy that I really, really liked him. When I first saw him, the more I watched him, the more I liked him. And I think he's somebody I think who could develop into a player for Notre Dame.
So I'll assume your first one was Armel Mukam.
Yes.
Yeah. That's obvious. Yeah. So I think that's a good pick. I guess I'll start on the 2024 class. I don't know if he would be this player would be considered like a low whatever. I feel like he's kind of been priced in a little bit, especially with a lot of the attention's paid to kind of other players. But I think Keaton Young is going to be really good. I think he's a really good back. I think he's kind of like the perfect back for Notre Dame offense. I think he's got the ability to have longer speed than I think you would think from his kind of his testing numbers. So I think that's up there. So I just think people should be more excited about him. And as far as the 23 class, I And again, this is, I guess, a quote unquote higher rated player. But some of these Brennan Vernon quotes and the way that he came in, there is something to be said about a guy who put in that much work into his body that just trends really well for someone who's going to realize their potential in college and at Notre Dame. When you see a guy just completely reshape his body in the way that we think about him, because, we both talked about it. Like, he just looked doughy. He looked like a guy. It's like he has to be a 3 tech because that's where his body is going.
He put on too much weight too fast. And I think I couldn't agree with you enough too. When guys take it that seriously, it's like, this guy must love football, because, in order to really take it seriously, to kind of be professional about it, really, right? And that's like a professional way to treat it. And a lot of guys it doesn't click for them until way late, right? Like, I think, I don't want to say, like, with a guy like Nano Safamenta, he didn't figure it out. Like, he hasn't been working towards that, but he's definitely a guy who was taken off later on in terms of his physical development and all that kind of thing. And that's partially the reason why he's been was a rotation player last year, but he hasn't been like an impact guy. And I would say, even with, like, you hear about like Riley Mills and how, oh yeah, he's really taken like a next step and all that stuff. And that's great. I think that's awesome. Notre Dame obviously needs that. But when you have guys who do it when they're coming into the program, or you hear, like, I mentioned in Six Thoughts today, like, about Josh Burnham, and like the comments that Al Golden brought up about Josh Burnham and what Al Washington was saying about Josh Burnham, and like how seriously he took, like, development, and how much he's improved, and how, like, man, this guy is tough, and all of these the adjectives they were using. I'm like, this guy is going to be a ball player for Notre Dame. He is going to be an impact player. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but he's going to be a ball player. And I would say that with Brennan Vernon too, right? Is like, when you hear that kind of thing, it's very rare that guy doesn't become a really good player. Maybe he's not going to be a first round pick or whatever, but he's going to be a player, a guy who helps Notre Dame, and probably sooner, not this year, probably because he's probably blocked. There's too many guys in front of him. But when you do that, that's how you jump the line, and that's how you end up playing sooner than you're supposed to, in terms of like where you might fit on the depth chart. So, even though maybe his ranking wise, he did drop. So I guess you could kind of list him at that. Yeah. He definitely was not getting the hype. And I still have some questions about him as a pass rusher, but I am excited about his future because of exactly what you said.
And like, you talk about jumping the line, that's the opposite of the doghouse. You know what I mean? Like when you show the coaches, like, that's work you do on your own. Because it's not just the weight room, it's also diet, right? And being disciplined with the things that you're eating. And that's very hard for a high school aged, late teens aged person to understand. Is like, you can't just eat whatever you feel like, and so it's not just a workout thing. It's also a diet thing. It's a discipline thing. And coaches love that. They do. And they take it very seriously with their players. So I just, like, anytime, and it's like your Armel Mukum point. It's just kind of the same thing. Like, when these guys show up and they've clearly taken their body seriously. This great example was Kyron Williams, where he came in, wasn't the most fit guy. And then over COVID, just when they're not together, he comes back and he's just completely different physically. And obviously that foretold, like, he's going to be a baller, He takes it very serious. And so that stuff is always a really good indicator. Like, if someone completely changes their body, it's a really good indicator on that. GVSND, Has there been an independent analysis of the safety of different brands of football shoes? Also, the big problem with the apparel contract is really the lack of transparency in the negotiations. There may be really good reasons for this decision, which we will never know about. Isn't this just the nature of Notre Dame as a private university? As far as the independent analysis, I will again defer to Mrs. Ueyama on that and her master's work on the topic. We've talked about it on multiple shows. I don't know that we need to go into that again. I think the big problem with the apparel contract is it's a third tier apparel company, and Notre Dame should not be. I think Notre Dame deserves better than that. I think their athletes deserve better than that. It's pretty it's kind of, I mean, it's pretty that's simple for me. Notre Dame deserves better than what Under Armour has to offer there. Do you have a comment on that?
I mean, I would just say it is really hard. You can't really criticize the negotiations. And I don't think we did criticize the negotiations. No. We're not saying like, oh, they should have went with Nike because Nike was the most money or this is that or whatever. We're just talking about it from the perspective of the athletes and what would be best for them. And I mean, I guess you could argue like getting the more money is could be best for them, but like I think there's another argument that that it's, and I think a fair one, that that it isn't the best in terms of footwear specifically, right? And that is, I think, something that I think can and should be criticized.
Yeah, you need to prioritize the athletes on that front. It's not apples to apples at this point. It's not equal. If all equal, then maybe the money, but it's not. It isn't. So, and that's kind of the problem with it. Beyond like my personal preference, if their gear was just the same as Nike or just as good, then as far as from a performance standpoint, then there would be less to criticize. But it's not the case. So I don't want to go into it too much because I already did that on Tuesday. Iris 2104. Any intel on at all on the Notre Dame TV deal and realignment? If the Big Ten gets to 20 teams, do they still take Notre Dame? Can Notre Dame command enough money out of a conference to stay independent? Is that their goal? I mean, I know we bashed the UA deal, but they did seem to set the bar financially. That is another. The last sentence there is also in dispute. Something we will not know. It was put in a headline, and the headline has since changed on that, by the way. So we don't know that to be true. But the TV deal, do you feel like that's going to be a difference maker as far as Notre Dame and joining a conference? Frankly, the UA deal and the way that's all gone down, it makes me a little bit nervous about the TV deal and how good that's going to be. But what's your take on this, Jamie?
I think, I mean, the TV deal has to be big. It does. Yeah. It has to be big, right? And if it's not big, then that pretty much makes the decision for them. Then they have to join the Big Ten. They don't really have a choice. But the one thing, which is so weird if they don't get a big contract, because they're the one program that 100% they have to, like, the people who signed the Big Ten contracts for their TV media rights deals will have to reopen it and give more money because Notre Dame is added. So that's why it kind of doesn't make sense if Notre Dame doesn't get a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, they're trying to negotiate. They're trying to pay Notre Dame the lowest amount, and Notre Dame's trying to get the highest amount. That's obviously what's happening. But the other thing about it, though, is that I don't know if I really don't know how the Big Ten feels about like how many more teams they want to add, right? Like they're having these, Dan Wetzel from Yahoo reported that they're having these exploratory conversations about adding Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal, right? Well, they would take Notre Dame over any of those teams, but is Notre Dame going to come? Would they take Notre Dame as an extra team? I'm sure they would. You know, if you're going to add 20, what's having 22 or whatever? And that, like, I'm sure that they would at that point. Because the other thing is the pie gets bigger when Notre Dame gets joined. So that's why I think that happens. I think it's more about, you know, with terms of realignment, you know, are you going to get enough money? Yes, that is a huge, huge part of it. But I think before it was, you know, path to the playoff. They have this path to the playoff, this 12-team playoff. Jack Swerbick, great job. You know, a lot of, you'd be critical of him, a ton of things. Getting that kind of path to the playoff, you could give him props for that, right? For that. But that 12-team playoff, it's 2024 and 2025. And it's a 2-year deal. So also, the Pac-12 might not exist in 2024.
Right.
And the Big 12 is like a whole bunch of mush. Like, why should the Big 12, why should they reward the Big 12? It's not a power conference anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I know TCU made it. That's great. They were a Cinderella. They're not a team like that every year. They're not going to have a team like that every year. And then if you really only have, say, 3 power conferences, right, with ACC included, but the ACC might break up like this. And I know there's all these other things with the grant of rights and all this stuff, but Florida State basically, like, they want out. Clemson, I'm sure, wants out. I think North Carolina, Virginia would, if they could get out, they would go to the Big Ten tomorrow if they could, right? Like, there's all this stuff. So usually when there's smoke with this kind of stuff, things end up crumbling, right? And so even with the thing with the Big 12, remember how it almost became the Pac-16 or whatever, right? Back in the day. And in order to keep it, they were like, we're going to give Texas and OU can get more money, right? That was like their main thing, is they could do that. Well, it still wasn't enough. They were like, well, we're going to join the SEC. So even if they do that with Florida State and Clemson, whatever, it's not going to be enough. So it's not going to last. Like, there's going to be some kind of breakup there. And then if there's no ACC, you know, what is Notre Dame going to do? I don't think they're going to have much choice. I think they're going to have to join the Big Ten. And so that's just kind of the way I see it. I know there's other people who disagree with me. And I know there's a ton of people who never want to see the Notre Dame join the Big Ten for many, many reasons. And I totally get that. But I just don't know if they're going to have a choice about it or not. I think that might be the only option.
Right. And not for nothing, but if they end up joining the Big Ten, let's say in 2 years or whatever it is, and all the people who are telling me that the cost of independence is signing with UA, then what?
Yeah.
Now you're stuck with that deal for another 8 years when you have all the money you need. So that's another reason why I don't like it. Brennan 77, getting some serious. This team is going to be really, really good vibes. Feel a lot of people are starting to get this sense too, like a top 5 team in the country. Good. What do you guys think? Am I crazy, or I am not crazy? Am I? What do you think, Jamie? Top 5 team?
Yeah, I think he's probably a little bit crazy. I don't think they're top 5. I think it's early to say that. Like, you can start talking top 5. They beat Ohio State. That's how I kind of view it. Is if, you know, there's still like a lot you have to learn about the team. I think there's the potential for the team to be, I would say, top 10. I think that is definitely on the table. You know, top 5 could happen, but there's just so many things that there's a lot of ifs that need to happen, right? So, you know, we talked about Merriweather, and it's like, if Merriweather's has 700 yards and he averages over 20 yards a catch, that's a big check, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so if they're able to, like, Holden States is a dude at tight end and he becomes like this total weapon, well, that's a big check, right, for the offense, right? And if on defense, if all of a sudden, like, you know, those guys that, like Anya and Rubio, they're like, Doodler, they're taking that step, right? And then all of a sudden, Botello is this consistent pass rusher. They get JJB becomes this really, really consistent pass rusher. The linebackers, there's all these things that have to happen that it's impossible to say that stuff now. Like, you can get excited about that. It could happen, but it's really impossible to say if it will happen. And I do think, like, yeah, keep the good vibes coming. Like, that's great. But also, you got to be kind of realistic about it until we kind of see a little bit more, right? Because I'll tell you one thing. I haven't heard enough or seen enough, and maybe I'll see it next week, but like, I just haven't seen enough where I'm like, oh, this guy for sure is like, oh, this guy's like something. Like, there isn't like a Claypool in 2019 camp where you're like, okay, like, this is like Claypool has made the jump. This is like something there. There hasn't been that kind of thing. There hasn't been like, oh, all of a sudden CJ Procise. Wow. Like, I mean, is CJ Procise, like, should have even been a running back the whole time? Like, this guy's got a chance to be great, right? Mm-hmm. There hasn't been that yet. Like, at least not in my mind. Maybe you disagree, Greg, but I just think until you hear a couple more things like that, I would probably slow it down on the possibly top 5 until more of that. We hear a little bit more about that.
Top 5 is kind of like, it doesn't really matter. Like, I just think of the schedule, right? How do you beat all these teams? Because they don't need to be quote unquote. If they win, like if they go 11-1, I think they probably will be top 5. So is TCU like last fall? Did people in the TCU beat? Were they like, is this a top 5 team? Were they asking those questions? Like, probably not, right? But it's just like, what do you have? So I view the team through the lens of like, what can they do that they couldn't do last year? And we talked about this all last year. Their best offensive player is a tight end. How are you explosive? And it was basically like Tyler Buckner and his athleticism. That's the X factor. And that was it. It wasn't that we knew he could be a good passer. It was just like, well, he's got good legs and, he's got a live arm. And that's kind of it. Well, this year, it's like Sam Hartman is a known, right? Like, he's a known quantity, right? And then you can look around. It's like the wide receiver talent is a lot better. Another thing I was thinking too is like, people rail against the wide receivers and that sort of thing. Like in 2018, when Brandon Wimbush was a quarterback, those wide receivers were doing very little. Their numbers were bad. They weren't going to do anything. And then Ian Book comes, and suddenly they got three wide receivers catching 50+ passes. Chase Claypool's breaking out, Fink's breaking out, Miles Boykin's breaking out. And suddenly all of a sudden they become better because they have a quarterback that not only they believe in, but the coaching staff believes in to call the plays that allow them. And so I think they could have just a completely different jump as well. So that's where the optimism comes from. So you feel like they can be a lot more explosive. They can do a lot more things than previous years. But it's like you said, we also heard that Miles Boykin was ripping Julian Love to pieces in 2018. Julian Love's an All-American, right? Like, no, we're not hearing about – yeah. So we're not hearing that Jaden Thomas or Tobias are ripping apart Ben Morrison or Cam Ward. Like, we're not hearing that. And maybe you'll see that. Maybe you'll come and we're not saying it's not going to happen. Maybe you'll come back. You'll see some practices and you'll be like, like this Tobias thing is real, or this Jaden Thomas thing is real, but we just haven't heard that yet. But I just think of what can Notre Dame do that they couldn't do last year. That's how I think about it. That's where my optimism comes from. But it's all kind of remains to be seen. Yeah. So these are all good questions. I'll really enjoy it. Ryan MS, which of the 6 proposed NIL bills in Congress will even the playing field best for Notre Dame? So here's the thing. And we've had some kind of insight on this from someone who's kind of involved in this world. None of these things are going to pass Like you can't get Congress to pass this stuff. Another thing is like
They
any of
can't
them,
pass stuff that actually matters most of
right?
the
Like
time.
so any of them, any regulation would help Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame doesn't want to operate in the gray. They want to be black and white. This is what
Yeah.
you can do. This is what you can't. Any regulation would be best, but they're not passing any of these. They're not. It's just that you can't get enough people to care. I don't care how bipartisan it is. To get the Senate to move the Senate to the Congress. I mean, just like Joe Biden passing something would just be the funniest thing, like signing a bill on NIL.
Yeah.
I just think that would be so funny. It's not happening. It's great for their press releases and all that stuff. If you're counting on the Congress,
counting on Tommy Tuberville to deliver it, I would suggest not.
it's tough.
Yeah.
Ryan MS, can you explain Rudolph offensive line philosophy, i.e., zone blocking and recruiting, primarily athletic, height, length, etc., physical maulers, all tackles, and move them to guard center, or who recruit specifically for guards and centers? What do you think, Jamie?
No, I can't really, because one, he hasn't been on campus long enough to kind of get an idea of like these are all who he likes, and I think based on like who he's offered, I will say the 2025 offers, they're definitely bigger. Like I think, which kind of fits with what where Heastan was very much like guys have to have a certain physical profile. Like there weren't many, like, even though he took Trevor Ruland, like there weren't many Trevor Rulands, right? Like it was a lot of size, and definitely like that was a thing that he valued. Certainly, and he valued a lot of different things. And I mean, you could say, you could pick Anthony Knapp and say like, well, I mean, obviously he's like, Rudolph liked him at Virginia Tech, and then he offered him there, and he's smaller and he has all this physical development to do and all this kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, I don't know if anyone saw it, but he did 315 for 8 on bench, which pretty good for a high school kid. Yeah, I'd say pretty good. I say like strength, he's doing well there. But he's different than pretty much all the other guys, right? So I can't say like this is where he really likes certain guys. I mean, I wouldn't say there's too many. He hasn't taken any like slow. There's definitely no slow-footed dudes, like just big guys that are slow-footed that he's in. I haven't seen that, but I mean, I think in general, you're not going to see that from any of the programs that really recruit at a high level like Notre Dame. And in terms of like his overall like philosophy in terms of like zone blocking or whatever, I mean, I guess someone could ask him the question and he could probably talk about zone blocking for like 20 minutes straight or something like that. But it's like, none of it is going to be that different from how he feels about zone blocking compared to, Harry Heastand or even Jeff Quinn, right? Like that isn't, and also too, he's going to, like how he prefers to block some things too. It has to be kind of married with Jared Parker and what he is going to call and all this. And you're going to also marry that with what the personnel can do best. Kind of like how that 2021 year when it was like, okay, we can't run outside zone anymore. We have to run inside zone, and we got to run duo. And this is all we can run basically the rest of the year because we don't have the guys that can do this at a very high level. And then they started to run the ball better because they just concentrated on these certain things. And I think we got to kind of know like what the guards can do and all that. And even based on what it looks like this year, that might not be everything that we see in Rudolph like going forward, because I mean, these aren't his guys technically, right? And he's like developing these guys, but there's, depending on who wins the job, who's best for it, who's that, like it's kind of impossible to say. And anyone who's like, well, Rudolph feels like this about zone blocking based on whatever, like this, like, I mean, what they run at Wisconsin is different than what they're going to run at Notre Dame. So it's like, I don't know. It's like apples and oranges to kind of compare all of it.
Yeah. And speaking of being a vest for the job, if you're looking for a professional cinematic video or photo, then you're going to want to go to VSR Media. Founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh, they provide professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel or have a personal story to tell, aiming to diversify your growing business, VSR Media specializes in short and long form video storytelling, social media management, website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily and receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. All right, moving on to our next question. Heyo127, if you could swap this year and next year's schedule, would you use Hartman on the tougher schedule or take the higher chance of a really strong season in a year? That's very important from a perception standpoint for the staff. I don't know. I don't like switching because then who's on the team next year? Like, how did they do without who's the quarterback? Like, who's the quarterback in 23 if it's not Hartman, right? Like, is it would they have gotten another grad transfer guy? Like, these are hard. Generally speaking, you know, like, take Hartman now and roll the dice. Like, I'd want to have Sam Hartman against like Caleb Williams and Kyle McCord. Like, give Sam Hartman like 2 home games against those teams, and I'll take my chances. You know, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, okay, so if you're looking at the 2024 schedule, right?
Yeah.
At A&M, right?
Yeah.
If you played A&M, this would be like the year to get them, because that 2024 year is like all that number 1 class. I mean, that's still around. There's still a lot of guys there. There's going to be a lot of 5-stars on that team that are in their 3rd year that are going to be dudes, right? Yeah. So he kind of sets up, I guess I wouldn't even look at it from a Hartman perspective. I'd look at it from like what these teams are going to be like. You know, Florida State, but then you could say Florida State is, I think, is going to be worse in 2024 than they are this year. Like, they basically returned to everybody. And then they're like, Jared Verse isn't sticking around for another year, and Jordan Travis is gone. And like, there's, you know, they're going to lose a bunch of guys to the league. And I mean, they can go heavy in the transfer portal, but they're not going to replace all those guys. They're going to take a step back. And like, Miami's probably going to be better next year, but I mean, who knows? They might even be a friggin' mess, and like Mario Cristobal might be getting fired for, you know, for all we know, because they're just such a gong show, right? So it just could be. It's so hard to kind of project all that. I don't know. I guess it's a fun hypothetical to look at, but I think like the one thing I'll say, because somebody asked this earlier about me, because I've always been like, Notre Dame 2024 is set up so much better than they are this year. Just because they have all these guys that we're kind of like excited about, that like have a chance to break out. Like, if they don't break out this year, there's a lot of guys who are going to break out next year, because they just a lot of young talent on the team in terms of how they recruited. And that team is going to have 3 Marcus Freeman recruiting classes with, like, I think a bunch of dudes that are going to be NFL guys on it. And, you know, they're going to have more of a bunch of those 2022 kids that were very excited about kind of seeing them develop are going to be, you know, in draft eligible years. So like, I think like, you know, someone like Jaden Mickey, who's probably gonna be really good this year, is going to be like even better there. Like, there's all these kind of things where they're set up there that I think they'll probably be fine at quarterback next year, whether that's in-house or if they get somebody in the portal, but just the team is going to be so much better. So I don't know. I mean, it's because of that. It's like, I don't even know how there's like a million little caveats you'd have to put with the hypothetical.
Yeah. All right, next question. Fifth quarter Irish. What do you think the realistic ceiling is for the 2023 Notre Dame defense, given the personnel available to them? Can they be a top 15 defensive efficiency? If they get high-end corner, solid D-line play, and support of high-scoring offense to make teams one-dimensional more often, do you think they have enough NFL prospects in the two deep to do that? I'm thinking about what it would take for Notre Dame to make a playoff, and top 5-10 offense seems doable. It is the top 15 to 20 defense that goes with it that seems tougher. What do you think? What do you think the ceiling is?
I mean, I think the ceiling is they can make. I think they could be a top 15 in defensive efficiency. Like, I think 100%. My guess is probably like 10 to 15 is probably the ceiling. I just don't know if they have enough elite players to really kind of like guys that are going to be like prolific kind of havoc producers that you would say like, oh, they're really going to take that jump. But I do think they're going to get high end quarter play. But I think they need more than solid D-line play. You know, they would need really, really good. Could happen, right? But, you know, definitely like, are they going to get like one of those guys at the second level, like a linebacker guy who's going to be like a playmaker? Because you kind of need playmakers at all levels, right? And to really kind of be in that kind of mix. I don't know. I do see them having the chance to be like what Fifth said in terms of a top 5 to 10 offense. And I think probably like a 10 to 15 defense. That is on the table. But that's like if everything goes right, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it's possible.
Last year they were 60th-ish in run defense efficiency. What do you think that can get to?
I think they will be better against the run this year. My guess is they'll probably be like top 30 or something, like, and that'll be kind of closer to kind of where they are. They're not going to be like this total elite team. And that's the thing, right? You better be, they might be elite against the pass, but I'm going to guess they're not going to be elite against the run. One, because I just think, I don't know if they're going to be good enough at linebacker and good enough at the defensive line. They could be good, but maybe not elite, you know?
Yeah. Like I think they were fine against the run, just not late against Ohio State. But like the problem with the USC game is they gave up 200 yards rushing. That's what killed them, because then it's like USC just eats up yards, you know, and it's just like they're never in a bad field position. They're never in a bad spot. They're always in the scoring zone. Therefore, they're always going for it on fourth down. You know, like it's just like that sort of thing that always accumulates there. So that's where it's the problem. I think that to me is like the biggest question. It's like, where can they get to as a run defense?
You're always going to be either outnumbered or even numbers against USC just because of how the offense they run. So, and you just don't want to be outnumbered in the passing game, or you're going to get killed. So, that's the real problem. But it's like, well, then you better like whoop them up front, and your linebackers better be great. And that was the problem. They weren't. So that's what you need, right? That's what you need. And then especially too, you just can't, against those teams, you just can't load the box. You can't, you can stop the run and load with numbers, but then I don't care how good your corners are too. You can't leave them out one-on-ones all day. Like, you're going to lose eventually. Like, it's just, you know, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Pete Quinlan, 1993, ranked the following records by probability. He ranks them. So first probable 9-3, second 10-2, third 11-1, fourth 8-4, fifth 12-0, sixth 7-5. So what do you think? Well, of those, which one do you think is most probable?
I think 10-2 is probably most probable. And then I would say probably 9-3 and 11-1 are probably pretty close. And then 7-5 is the least like is by far the lowest. And I'd say
you need injuries.
Yeah, and okay, this is how I do it. 10-2, like right, like that is probably the most probable. And then I would put 9-3 and 11-1 in the next tier, and then I put 12-0 below that, and then 8-4, 7-5 at the bottom.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's exactly right. So yeah, no notes. I think that you got that exactly correct. And Thurman says, "Do you want to join the Big Ten?"
I mean, I don't want to join the Big Ten. I'm not. A school that plays Power 5 football. So I personally don't want to join the Big Ten. Do I want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten? I mean, not really. I think if the ACC is able to survive and Notre Dame is able to still kind of do what they do now, where they can beat up on bad ACC teams for many, they've won 28 straight games against the ACC, right? Like, I think that would be good to continue to do that and not have to play. Like, if you join the Big Ten, your regular season schedule becomes a lot harder. Your schedule becomes more constricted. All that kind of stuff for Notre Dame becomes much, much more difficult to kind of manage. Obviously, the money is way better, right? So I think if without taking money off the table, no, and then also too, like all of like the past history with the Big Ten, which I totally get, like it's not a good history. I think that with all that being said, I think Notre Dame shouldn't want to join the Big Ten, but it's probably why they haven't joined the Big Ten.
Right.
Because if they wanted to, the Big Ten has wanted them for decades. Like they're like, hey, come on in. Like, and Notre Dame's like, nah, we don't need like, but that's just how it is. I'm sure that's just how everyone feels is no one really wants to join the Big Ten. But I mean, I think it's not going to be about want at some point.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to join any conference, but I don't want to join the Big Ten. It's kind of like you said, like the past. And I think people were like, oh, it was a long time ago. It's like, well, you know what, Big Ten, will you apologize? Like, will you apologize for your past indiscretions? And they obviously won't. And it's like, to me, until you do so, like I don't feel like Notre Dame should have a big need to join up with them. I think independence is more fun. I think you have more. They're playing Texas A&M. You know, they played Georgia. You're not playing either of those teams if you're in the Big Ten. Why would you? Like, there's no point to that. You know that you wouldn't. I mean, because Ohio State and like USC aren't going to schedule those games. They're not going to do that once they join the Big Ten. Look at Michigan's poo-poo schedule. Like that's why is that good? I don't see why that's a positive. Obviously, they're going to like Michigan's going to gain UCLA and USC, and so I guess like to the point, like in your point, like Notre Dame probably will, and it'll get to the point where when they join the Big Ten, there will be so many other schools that aren't traditional Big Ten teams that the schedule might become a little bit more, diverse in that way. But at the same time, too, like they won't be in control of how they schedule and when they schedule teams and that stuff. So I don't know. I don't want them. I don't want them in that. And so that's I don't like that. All right, moving on. Loyal stepson. Is there any chance playing Howard Cross at the 3 tech, platooning with Riley Mills would bolster the line? I asked because if Rubio and Anye can up their games, I wondered if Cross could be better at the 3 tech. Is he too small for a 3 tech?
No, he's definitely not too small for a 3 tech. He's pretty much, I mean, he's bigger than right now. He's bigger than Jason Ademola ever was. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's definitely big enough to play 3 tech. I mean, nose is a harder position where you probably need to be bigger if you can, he can play it because of his quickness and his kind of like violence, his hand violence off the line and stuff. I've always said that he's a guy who could be better as a 3 tech. So I do think that kind of scenario where he is able to kind of play more or at least get a little bit more time as a 3 tech, I think would be beneficial for Notre Dame. And I do think, I mean, Rubo, and Anye both are guys that, Washington had said too that both those guys will get reps at 1 tech. So I think that my guess is you'll probably see him play a little bit there this year. He'll probably play a little bit more because of it. If they feel really good about those guys, it sounds like they do.
Yeah, agree. Let's go. Pep ND04. Impact of more conference realignment on the future of Notre Dame independence and scheduling. FSU made headlines that they are looking to get out of the ACC, as well as smoke around Big Ten, looking at Oregon and Washington, 2 conferences means for Notre Dame. Thanks. We've kind of touched on this, right? I think if there's 2 super conferences, Notre Dame will be in one of them. So that will kind of take care of itself. I do think it's kind of important what happens with the ACC, right? Like if Florida State and Clemson are gone, then there's no point in Notre Dame having that deal with them in 5 or 6 games a year. That will probably be a pretty big domino as far as what Notre Dame does and independence and that sort of thing. Also, what it would mean for their the basketball program, that's another part. It's like all the sports that are in the conference for their leagues and that sort of thing, like that's a huge thing for them as well. So the what's going on with the ACC is very important to kind of figure out as far as where Notre Dame's going to fall in this. I don't know. I don't love talking about it. It's kind of like recruiting. It's recruiting's fun and the realignment is fun, but it's in camp, right? And I understand why people are asking. I'm not going in on the.
Oh, it matters. It matters.
Yeah, it totally matters. It's just there are so many moving pieces that
you'd rather not be. You'd rather be talking about the season and
right. So it's unfortunate that this is all happening, in early August, right? Talk about this in June. Talk about this in May.
I'll say, I mean, I wrote about it in 6 Thoughts, so you can read about it there. That kind of more detail of kind of my thoughts on it there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just inevitable that if it's 2 super conferences, they're not going to be and Notre Dame. That's it's not gonna.
That's not how
it's not going to go, right? And also too, if it's two super conferences, that will be the time when those conferences break away from the NCAA.
Yeah.
And because of that, that is just something where it's because they're going to want to handle all of their own business, and there'll probably be some kind of commissioner or something or whatever that is hired to kind of oversee all that.
Commissioner Jack Swarbrick.
I mean, it could be. He's qualified, I guess, technically, right? Try to be the NCAA president at one point, right? So, yeah.
All right. JM says, why was last year's red zone defense so bad? What are they doing to fix it this year?
I mean, I wrote about this quite a while ago. I mean, God, man, the off season's long, man. You read about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wrote about one of the things was the havoc was so bad in the red zone. Mm-hmm. And when you're not creating negative plays and putting the teams in bad situations, if a team is getting favorable situations, there's the stat, right? Advanced at EPA, expected points added. Mm-hmm. Well, if teams are always getting positive EPA against you in the red zone, you're setting yourself up to fail later, especially that close to the red zone. And that was the thing. They were getting, teams were getting too many positive things. So they were putting Notre Dame in bad situations when it's okay, well, instead of it being, it's a lot harder to score when it's 3rd and 11 because you made a tackle for loss on first down, and then they had to pass in the second down, and all these kind of things that go into it. But if they run for 6 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 4, well, the whole playbook's open, and it's just so much harder to defend when that happens. And I think that was kind of the main thing, was that Notre Dame didn't create enough negative plays in that area of the field. And I don't think, people say everyone always wants to bring up that safety blitz against Ohio State, which was outside of the red zone, by the way. But in terms of being aggressive, like no one wants to see a play like that. And I think you and I have both been on record that it was bad execution, not a bad call, right? More so than a bad call. Like the call could have been okay, but the execution was just so bad that they got burned. So I don't know if it's being more aggressive in terms of the blitz, but they just have to find a way to create more havoc there, get off, create a turnover in the red zone. Like, they just didn't do any of that. Like, that's the main thing. And they just didn't turn the ball over enough, period, right? Like, all this kind of stuff. That's the main thing. If you're not doing that kind of thing, and, you're just giving up way too many points.
Yeah. I will be on the record that I don't mind heating up the quarterback in that spot. I hate bringing safeties from depth. Period. I don't care if they're up 50-0. I feel like it never gets home. But it is true that they didn't execute it right. They were late blitzing. Jaden Mickey was shading the wrong way. He got out leveraged. Basically all the things you can't do in that defense, they did. I also think it's kind of like it went from up 3 to down 4, it's not like they did that and then there were 5 other things that happened and they lost by 35. It's just, sometimes you make a bad call, or like the call doesn't work. It was 14-10. It's not like it was that big a deal. So yeah. Let's see. Collie 123. If Florida State and Clemson joined the Big Ten, what does that mean for Notre Dame's independence in the ACC as a whole? It means the ACC will not exist, and it probably means that Notre Dame will no longer be independent, as we have covered. Do you have anything else on that, Jamie?
I mean, I don't think those teams are joining. They're not going to be Big Ten teams. They're trying to get into.
I think SEC. He means just leaving the conference period.
Yeah.
Or
I think this would be the one thing too that can stall all of it, is because the SEC is like, why do we need to add these teams right now?
Yeah.
Because they really
so the thing is like, that was a point that people were making, is like Florida State, they're doing a lot of talking, but the teams that actually joined conferences didn't do this talking because they were joining the conferences. I usually are not as like, I'm open for business the way Florida State was, like that.
I think if they got that invite to like the Texas and Oklahoma invite or whatever, they would have gone, right? Like,
they just go.
But they didn't, and they would pay whatever they got to pay or whatever. Like, but they don't have that, on the table right now. And weirdly, Virginia and like North Carolina are probably better positioned to just go to somewhere else right now. I mean, I'm sure they don't want to pay whatever the grant of rights fee is, and that's probably what's stopping them. But I think they would just gladly. I think the Big Ten would be way more open. Big Ten seems still pretty open to expansion. The SEC is kind of like, now we're cool.
Yeah. All right. Mayday says, beyond Lambert and Beasley, who should Notre Dame be targeting in the 2024 class? Should they try and flip an up-and-coming wide receiver, Viper, safety? If so, what type of receiver should they go for? And are there any specific guys on Notre Dame's radar? So someone asked a question like this in the chat, and I knew this was coming up, so we're answering his question. I think, if you land Lambert, that gives them 23 in the class. I think they'll still recruit Beasley. I think anybody you find, you have 24, you would have 23 at that point. Anyone you find at this point who you think is a player, go get him, because you have spots to play with, right? Like, I don't think you need to worry about 25 guys. 24 guys, 26 guys, like the way that the roster turns over and all that stuff, they're never going to be over, ever. So don't even worry about it. You see a wide receiver that you like, who's committed somewhere, they call you up, or they've been recruiting, they're still talking to them. You find someone you like, get in on them, like get them. Like, I don't care. Like, to me, there's not even There's not really even a position beyond offensive line because it's not a great class, but and probably not quarterback either. But like a running back, probably you don't need to do that. You're not going to get a lot of traction with running backs, but wide receiver, safety, a Viper, sure. Like whoever. If you find someone you think is good, go get them. I have no problem. As far as names, I think it's all kind of unknown right now. Like those people haven't identified themselves, or Notre Dame hasn't, identified them in a kind of a public way. Did you have a take on that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of names, the same. I would say, like, we'll probably find out more. Like, I guess, when I would guess around Ohio State game.
Yeah, I was going to say late September, because that's when you start getting tape out there, and it's like, oh, okay.
And they will probably want to maybe get some guys. And then also, too, that's also where, like, oh, man, this team started 0-2. And that happens, too. And then last year, that was Notre Dame. So, I mean, I would generally agree with you in terms of, like, if you got a really, really good guy, go get him. I would say wide receiver is definitely, like, I think they do got to get another wide receiver for sure. Yeah. And my preference, if I was them, would be another speed guy.
Yep. Agree. More speed. And the good thing about Isaiah Canyon, what he was size and speed. So yes. Go for that. But yeah, definitely speed. Blue Claw says Luke Talich, fact or fiction? I say fact. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be a player. I think he's going to work out.
I say fact. Like, he's a real person. They got pictures of him and everything.
Yep.
There.
He's on the roster.
He exists. I mean,
shout out.
Great job, Rick, as always. Who knows? It's impossible to say. Like, will they put him on scholarship? Like, when they put him on scholarship, then you're like, okay, then you could say that's going to be something. And I think, okay, so here's just an example of, like, so Chris Fink, right? Chris Fink definitely showed up before, like, he was on scholarship. People were like, yeah, Fink makes a lot of plays, So I don't think anyone's seen enough to say, like, with Luke Talich, like, man, Luke Talich showed up. Like, is Luke Talich, like, is he up there with Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick? Like, if he is, then you're like, okay, well, then I would say fact, right? But it's like, I don't know that yet. Like, I just, wait and kind of see. Certainly, I think he's probably, like, the best walk-on Notre Dame has landed in a long time that I can think of. That I'm like, this where you watched him, and even if you just didn't know about any of this, he had Pac-12 offers, whatever. Even if you just watched him, you'd be like, this guy's good. Why, like, did he not go somewhere else? Like, and really, it's only because he's from Wyoming, right?
And he wanted to go to Notre Dame.
Yeah,
he was offered. He wanted to go to Notre Dame. That was his goal. I could see, like, kickoff guy, like 6'4", runs a 10.8. Put him on kickoff, right? Like, have him go chase people down. Kickoff return, punt block, that sort of thing.
Oh my gosh, who was the gunner on punt? That the guy on the white, I believe it was Charlie Weiss year's walk-on guy. Yes. That guy made so many freaking tackles. That he was, I mean, that was a guy too who just became, like, he made a name for himself just by doing it. I mean, apologies for forgetting his name right now, but, like, he like always showed up. It was fun to watch.
Yeah. Rad Irish, what do you think of the odds of Notre Dame being independent in 5 years? Is big membership inevitable? I would say yes.
I think it's inevitable, and I would say the odds in 5 years, I'd say not good that they're going to be independent in 5 years. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Yep. Not 100, but not 90.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere in there. Let's see. Irish KG07. Any whispers of Notre Dame doing any uniform tweaks for the Navy game? They'll probably have a decal or something. There might be something like that, but beyond that, I don't think so. Notre Dame likes to likes to promote these things, and they have not. So, like, we're less than a month out. I just don't see that happening. Do you have a thought on that, Jamie?
Yeah, I don't know why they would have promoted the Irish wear green before that if they were going to do it. So it doesn't really make sense. So my guess is they'll just wear their regular
maybe something that's like super cosmetic.
Something small.
Same question, Irish KG07. I asked on Power, but I'd like to hear Greg's take. Do Bauman and Evans take a back seat to Stays and Raritan this year? If they were all full go, those two just don't generate much buzz. Bauman's got to be healthy. Like he's hurt all the time. And
he's been hurt for 2 years.
Yeah, so that's not good for his trend. As far as Evans, like I think Evans is good. I just do. And so in the Raritan thing too is like they seem to be like don't get hurt again. Because if he's out there
ACL 2 years in a row.
Yeah, if he's out there with no braces, but like they're just talking about, hey, we're taking it slow. Like they're not even giving him contact right now. I can't say that he's like jumping Mitchell Evans because I think Mitchell Evans is good. I do think Stays is like a real thing. That's just my opinion. I think he's going to be the number one this year. I mean, if anything, 1A, as far as maybe 1A, 1B equal snaps. So I think he's the future, I guess, quote unquote, at that position. But it's hard for me to say Raritan because he's not even fully cleared. He's not even taking real contact yet. And so I can't say that. And I think Evans is good. For Bauman, he just hurt all the time. So it's
it's really unfortunate for Bauman too, because before that season when he got his first injury a couple years ago, I mean he looked really good in camp. He was like, I was like, I mean, Bauman, I would have said he was going to be a player. Like, I mean, certainly he wasn't going to jump Michael Mayer, but he was going to be a guy that they could use.
Yeah.
And he just hasn't stayed healthy. Like, you hope he's healthy. And you know what? Kudos to Stays too, because this is exactly like those guys are hurt. Take advantage of the opportunity, man. Like, great job. Like, that's exactly what you want to hear.
Yeah. Chris ND92, Sam Hartman will undoubtedly improve Notre Dame's offensive productivity for 2023, but he's gone after 1 year. What will his lasting effect on Notre Dame football be? What can Notre Dame do now to maximize his lasting effect? What do you think, Jamie?
I mean, lasting effect. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think he's going to have a big year, but if Notre Dame, okay, he might have a big year, but say if, like we said, the most probable is Notre Dame goes 10-2. Well, if Notre Dame goes 10-2, he has a big year. What will his lasting effect be? Meh. Like, that's just whatever. He helps Notre Dame. His lasting effect is he helps Notre Dame recruit Deuce Knight and all these other people to show, like, hey, this is what the offense can look like. Right? When you have a quarterback, right? Like that will be his lasting effect. But in terms of like him being, I don't know, like remembered as like, man, this guy's whatever, like people shouldn't even concentrate on that. It should be more about like what he could do for this team this year in terms of like, raising the ceiling of the offense. And by doing so, and by being able to open up the offense more and be more diverse in the passing game because of that, well, that's the thing that attracts recruits and is going to. And if Notre Dame was just a straight ground and pound team again, or just say like they didn't take Hartman and they took Buckner and Buckner stayed and Buckner was the quarterback, but Buckner was like, didn't get there to where he needed to be as a passer, but he was still like a really dangerous runner and a good player that way. Just say he was like a better version of Wimbush, right? Yeah. A better version of Wimbush as a passer and all that, right? That the offense is still going to be pretty good, but it doesn't really help for what Notre Dame would need in recruiting in terms of attracting receivers, attracting quarterbacks that want to do this. Because then all you're doing is selling the promise. It's like, well, just wait. This is what we're going to do if you come
this
here.
is what I want to do if I can get you in the program, kind of thing.
It's so much easier to recruit a kid when you can show them this is what we have done, right? It's why, part of the reason why these schools that recruit really well keep recruiting really well is because they put these guys in the league. They run these type of offenses. They get all these sacks on defense. They do all these kind of things. And when you show them that, here's the proof. This is want to show you what you can be. I'm not going to show you some clip of an NFL guy and like, this is the whatever. I'm showing you a guy who this is in our defense this year. And this is what you're going to do next year. Like, that is how you sell these guys. It's a much easier sell. So I think that would be the biggest impact. That's the biggest impact he can have for Notre Dame.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And this is why, like, to go back to the start of the show, like, that's why I think all those Hartman questions are going to hit over, because I think that's what they want. I think they need to do that. I mean, you look at the 05 team. That team was so fun, and what came from that, right? Jimmy Clausen came from that, and Michael Floyd, and Golden Tate, and Kyle Rudolph, and Duval Kamara was a 5-star, and they got Shaq Evans from. I mean, you just got so many wideouts who were like, I want to play in that offense. That was awesome. Brady Quinn was great. Samardzija was great. Stovall was great. McKnight was great. Like, playing in that offense was like, yes, that's what I want. They got Dane Chris, 5-star quarterback. Like, they got guys. And that is the thing that could be the lasting impact for Sam Hartman, to where it's like, yes, Deuce Knight watches them play. And it's like, yes, I want to play with that. I want to play with those back. Like, Ohio State gets good running backs. Ohio State gets good offensive linemen, but they're throwing the ball over the yard, And so that's what I think. They can still play with power, but, guys running free in the secondary, chucking the ball, slinging the ball. Matt Freeman is jumping up and down, getting kicked out of the press box because he's so happy. Like, that's the type of thing that could happen. I'm obviously not the last part. I'm joking, but just like changing the perception of what Notre Dame is offensively could be his lasting impact. Jamie, we have reached the last question of the day. Thank you, everyone, for these questions. They were awesome. I didn't get to so many in the chat because I knew we had a long show today. So we wanted to get all the questions from people, ISD subscribers. This is from Sloth. NBC announced we are still getting Garrett on the NBC on Notre Dame broadcast, but Kyle Rudolph was announced to be color for the Big Ten games on NBC after doing the Notre Dame spring game as his first telecast. Do you think NBC would ever put him on a Notre Dame game? And did the spring game performance make you want him over Garrett now? As far as Kyle Rudolph, probably he could get it if he has a good year this year. Just generally speaking, I would not want someone who has just started doing Notre Dame games as a color guy, just generally speaking. I mean, look, NBC it was a disappointment last year. It's a disappointment again this year. It's just they treat Notre Dame like a third-tier operation, and that Notre Dame is not getting Tirico when he's doing other football games is just ridiculous, in my opinion. I think NBC has really fallen off. I don't think their coverage of other sports is very good. The only time I think they're actually covering things really well, their track and field coverage is amazing. Their golf coverage stinks, frankly. I think their Olympic coverage stinks. You don't know how to find their stuff. It's like everything happens on delay. Even if you can watch it like during the day, they want everything in prime time. So they'll huge events will take place in the middle of the day, and you just have to try to miss it because they don't show it till later. It's just like that. That doesn't work in 2023. I don't know why they can't put pregame stuff on Peacock every single day, like a band cam, a warm-up cam. They don't do that. ESPN has Sky Cams and Skycasts and all 22 for the playoff games and for their New York 6 games. You have all those things. NBC can't do that. I don't know why. take pride in it, take pride in the product. And it just seems like it's going through the motions. They're just doing the littlest thing they can. So that's my rant on that. Do you have a comment, Jamie?
I think they do a pretty good job with the Sunday Night Football.
Sunday Night Football is very good. True point. I meant to bring that up.
But I mean, that's the problem, though, is you can see such a stark difference between that and what they do for Notre Dame games. I'm going to assume kind of what they do for Big Ten games, although they seem to be blowing it up a little bit more. But I mean, I don't know. If you think about it, like some of the stuff that they're saying in that press release in terms of what they're going to do for the Big Ten thing, it's not that different than what they're doing for Notre Dame. Like in terms of like, they're going to be on site. It's like, I mean, Liam McHugh was on site all the time for Notre Dame, and they were always doing that. Or Catherine Tappan was on. Like they've done that kind of thing. I will say just the de-emphasis of Notre Dame broadcast last year. Like, and it wasn't just that they put, I mean, Jack Collinsworth, I mean, he's young. I think Jack Collinsworth probably has a chance to be a pretty good play-by-play guy. And it's not just saying this because he's like a Notre Dame alum or anything like that. Like, I think he's someone that is going to be better. And like, I don't have a problem with him being, the play-by-play guy for Notre Dame. And then
in a vacuum,
right? But obviously when you go from Mike Tirico to him, it's a significant step down, and you're giving him Jason Garrett, who also is a rookie, really, right, in terms of broadcasting. And just there's nothing about Jason Garrett as a coach speaking to the media, nothing about what you saw from him as an analyst when he did his little stuff on Sunday Night Football that made you think, man, I want to hear what this guy thinks during a game. Like there's nothing that. So that's a problem. And then the fact that they had the thing where they're like, oh, we brought like a random former player to come here and talk about Notre Dame during the game, and then a random former player from the other team to come and that Notre Dame is playing to talk to. That was so just like high school amateurish. It just was not good.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen that on an actual broadcast. Like, I mean, if you were going to like blow it up and say like blow it up in the pregame and we're going to get a couple thoughts from these guys. Yeah, that's cool. Whatever. Right. But like, this is the halftime thing that you're going to, when it's clear that like most of those guys, even though maybe they were happy to go on it, weren't like broadcasters, and maybe probably didn't even want to be broadcasters. They're like, yeah, right, I'll come on and do it. So,
yeah. I'll yeah.
And so it just wasn't, it wasn't a good broadcast the way they did it. And it was definitely a step down from what they did before. And like where even before where you had Chris Sims on the sidelines, and Sims was obviously better. He's a professional broadcaster. You say you like him or don't like him, he's better than having these random guys. And Rudolph, I thought Rudolph sounded like a guy who was just starting out in the spring game. So it'll probably be best for him to do some of these lower Big Ten games and then improve. NBC has always been hesitant to kind of put Notre Dame guys. And I mean, why else were they picking like USC and Boston College guys to put in there? It's like they're almost putting it on purpose to kind of downplay Notre Dame or like their bias. But I don't know. I really don't know what the answer is there for NBC, but it definitely doesn't make Notre Dame fans feel good about like, oh, Notre Dame really want to keep the partnership going with NBC. And I guess because they do like the fighting for this and whatever, like they love that kind of stuff. But it's like, well, what about the actual product of like producing the game? Because that doesn't sell Notre Dame. That part doesn't sell Notre Dame football, which is kind of what it's supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about selling the, these other, people that are work for the university and whatever. Yeah, maybe that does get some people to be like, hey, I didn't know Notre Dame was doing all this. That's cool. Like, that's great. But they're getting this money for football. We're trying to sell the football program, grow the brand of the football program. And when they are giving the kind of quality of broadcast that it was last year, that's not getting it done. Like,
It
that's
hurts
not
the brand.
It hurts the brand. You're right.
Yeah. So, don't hurt the brand. It's pretty much, it's, like I always say, do no harm and that sort of thing. So that's where we come out on that. We're done, Jamie. We did it. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions. That was really fun. We can't do these too often because the shows are very long, but we love to do that. So you want to stay tuned in to irishsportsdaily.com and subscribe to our show. Jamie is going to South Bend tomorrow, and he's going to be on site. So we're going to get a lot of firsthand accounts from him on the team, and we're going to have a lot to talk about there. So you're going to want to check us out. Subscribe to the show, hit the like, hit the notification bell so you know we're going live. If anything's breaking like that, head over to irishsportsdaily.com and check out all our content there. Everyone's doing some really good work. We'll be back next week with Jamie on site in South Bend. Have a good weekend, everyone, and we will talk to you very soon.